The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of the owner, staff, or management of this radio station.
Let's go, girls. Come on.
From New York City to Los Angeles, Powered Up with Beck and Franklin is giving women of all ages permission to live the life they've always dreamed of. Why live in black and white when you can choose the brilliance of 3D and Technicolor? Each week, Sandra Beck and Linda Franklin and their high-powered guests will be here to cheer you on, to share their challenges, their successes, and what they've learned along the way. It's all about women supporting women. The stories and practical tips on sex, beauty, money, and so much more are designed to help you reconnect to the powerful woman you are. Fabulous knows no limits. Now it's time for you to expand your boundaries. Here are Sandra Beck and Linda Franklin.
Hey ladies, this is Sandra Beck and I'm here with Linda Franklin, and from coast to coast we've got you covered on Powered Up Talk Radio. Linda, we have such a tough topic today, but I'm so happy that you're here with me to talk about it, because I really truly believe that we can be empowered as women, empowered as families, as caregivers, when we talk about difficult topics like death. And today we're going to have Rosemary Collins from Buffalo Hospice on. They were the hospice facility that cared for my mom in her final stages. And I have to tell you, Linda, I had no idea how much hospice does for a family until I experienced it. Have you had an experience with hospice?
No. Actually, my mom didn't. My mom just died of old age, actually. I mean, she was 98 and a half, and she was really in really, really good shape up until the last 6 months of her life. And my mom was in Toronto and I was in New York, so I had 24/7 women in our home in Toronto taking care of her. So she did not have to go to hospice, but the last, I guess, was week of her life, she did go to hospital, and that's where she passed on.
Wow. You know, it's one of those things that I've noticed. Like, I had a few friends in my 20s and 30s who lost a parent or lost a spouse or a friend. Like my friend Tammy Barillari passed away from breast cancer when she was only in her early 30s. And so, today's show goes out to all the women and men who have struggled with cancer and then have used the hospice services. I mean, I guess any illness you can have the hospice service, but when you get in your 40s, 50s, and 60s, you get a lot more friends and family passing away, or their parents passing away. In fact, this month I've had two of my girlfriends lose their mothers, one from lung cancer, one from breast cancer, and this was not something I experienced when I was younger. Did you find the same thing as you got older?
When I'm trying to think, when I was a young girl, I know that I had an aunt that passed away from breast cancer, but that was about it. No, of course, as you get older, they're getting older, and as you get older, you're much more susceptible to disease. You know, diseases of aging, cancer, a whole bunch of stuff. But and it was never, obviously, it's never it's not a really talked about topic because nobody wants to think about it. It's like writing a will. Nobody wants to do it because you don't like to think of your own mortality. But there's so many things that go, that happen as your parents age that have to be taken care of, and so many don't take care of it because their parents don't cooperate with that, and that's everything from signing over powers of attorneys, knowing their affairs. It didn't. I got lucky. I mean, I squeaked by just with the powers of attorney and getting a power of medical surrogate, I guess is what you call it, or whatever. Probably 6 months before my dad got sick, and he got sick before my mom. So, if I hadn't had that in order, I don't know. I really would have been up. Can I say Schitt's Creek? Well, I just said it, and it was doubly hard for me because it was a different country. So I had to know what I could do there, which was different than what I could do in the United States. So, it was challenging.
I bet. Well, and one of the things when I think you touched on a really, important point is that these are topics nobody wants to talk about: death, dying, hospice, end of life, power of attorney, and I forget what I signed for my kids so that my ex-husband doesn't pull the plug prematurely. I forget I signed something.
Well, knowing your ex-husband, all you have to do is have the hiccups, and he'd say, "Okay, let's let her go, let her go."
Absolutely. He'd be in there kicking the plug like there's no tomorrow. Like, there goes her, oxygen source. But, we laugh about these things because they're part of life. And when we empower ourselves and we're not afraid, I've been coming out of my shell these last couple years after, a very, very difficult marriage, and experiencing domestic violence. So it's been a long process for me. And I realized with all this, Linda, that the most important questions we have to ask is what we're most afraid of. Because when we do that, we get empowered with information, and it's not scary anymore. When my mom was diagnosed and she was sick, I was so frightened. I didn't know what was going to happen to her. I didn't know, this word hospice and palliative care. It was all frightening because all I could think of is they're sticking her with pins and, doing all this research on her. That's the perception I had. Well, the experience I had was a completely different thing, and that's why I'm so excited to do this show today, because not only do we get more powerful when we acquire knowledge, but so much of our fear is a fear of the unknown.
Of course. And the ultimate fear for all of us is the fear of dying, because that is the grand unknown. Nobody can tell you what happens after, and it could be the greatest thing, like when Steve Jobs was his last words were, "Oh, wow." I hope it is an "oh, wow." And the books that I've read, it is an "oh, wow." But for an "oh, wow," it's like the scariest "oh, wow" in the world, because, you don't come back from that, at least in the same form as that you left in, so.
Well, and I think even just, one of the things, and we'll get into this later in the show, was that hospice had shared with me was that there is a dying process, especially for terminally ill patients.
Yes.
And I was so afraid because, some of these cancers are so painful, and my mom was in so much pain at different times in her, what we'll call her dying process from the time she was diagnosed. I mean, we're all dying, but in her active dying process. And then I was so afraid she'd be in so much pain. And then when I found out that, they put a morphine pump and, that could give her relief, and they give her anti-hallucinogens that can help with the anxiety and the fear, it didn't help a whole lot, but it helped some in that, I don't know, dying is a very out-of-control feeling. So when you have information and you have a procedure and there's a dying process, I mean, it made it something I could at least wrap my head around, which is something I couldn't do prior.
Okay. Well, before Rose comes on, let's talk about living. So did you have a good week?
I did. I had a very interesting week. It looks like I'm going to be going back to court with the ex-husband's girlfriend now. So I'm thinking, I used to be like Sandra Beck, Lifetime movie. Now I'm Sandra Beck, LA Law. That's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, but yes. Yeah, you're your own defender all the time. It's crazy. Well, I had a good week because we had our Fleet Week makeover last week, and it was a huge success. So before the show, I was just looking at the pictures that the photographer sent me, and I think she really captured the moment. It was wonderful. One of the women, and they caught it. Well, they caught it on a video because we had local TV coverage, and they caught that tear dropping from her eye onto her cheek. So it really captured it. And those were tears of joy. It was wonderful, and we had about 70 guests that came, and it was very well supported. And these women were they were treated like queens, and they were just eating it up. They just loved it. During the makeover, there was a special spread just for them, and champagne, and they felt like celebrities. You know,
now, Linda, before we continue, tell our listeners, for those who are just joining the show today and aren't regular listeners, what event are you talking about, and why is it so powerful for women?
Well, this is my Shining Service events, my beauty makeovers, which we do about 6 or 7 a year, and we make over in wonderful high-end salons, mostly here in New York City, of veteran women and women that are still, active duty. And we had 3 women come up from Virginia who were in the Navy, and they were part of the event. And then we had 3 veterans that were in from Long Island. So we just want to make them feel that, that they're appreciated. We want to make them feel beautiful. We want to reconnect them with their femininity. And we achieve all of those things, and it's just such a powerful event, not only for the women that are being made over, but for the wonderful people that are working on them, doing hair color and cuts and makeup and manicures, and the guests that come to talk to them and be part of the event. I mean, it's just a very, very emotional, wonderful time, because these women are basically putting their life on the line for us, and nobody's saying thank you. Well, this is the beginning of our Shining Service. Thank you to them, to show them how beautiful they are, reconnect them with that.
That's so important for us to reconnect from the inside out. Linda, people can see these photos coming up on your website soon?
Yeah, it's shiningserviceworldwide.com. There is a makeover page where we have all our others listed, but this will be up hopefully, by the weekend or early next week. I can say it again on the show. And we had a video company there, and they shot all of this, so they're making a very special video for us. So it will really, just watching it, my words can't express it, but I'm sure in the video, because all the women were interviewed, you'll be able to really just see the juice of it, and it's just a lovely, lovely time. It's hard to describe. You have to be there to feel it.
Okay, well, check it out. Check out the videos and pictures on shiningserviceworldwide.com. We're going to come back from the break with Rose Collins from Buffalo Hospice. Yes, that's Buffalo, New York, with all the snow. And come back, you're going to want to learn about the death and dying that we have available to us.
We've got lots more Powered Up with Sandra Beck and Linda Franklin after these messages.
Every woman, it's all in
Lori Hurley, the social networking navigator, helps you overcome your overwhelm online and make social media easy. Every week, she shares the latest and greatest about social networking and welcomes industry experts and end users of different social media platforms to share their experiences moving their business forward online. Whether you are a Facebook fanatic or a lover of LinkedIn, Lori has you covered on all angles of social media, including Twitter, YouTube, blogging, Google+, and more. Lori shares her knowledge and love of educating others on all things social media with relevant material, engaging guests, and hot tips and techniques to help you soar down the social media highway. Join her every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time for the Social Networking News Hour here on the Woohoo Radio Network. Are you ready to start rocking that woohoo that only you do? Because Lisa Stedman is on a mission. She will dare you, challenge you, enlighten you, provoke, and empower you to bring out that inner woohoo. Lisa is an internationally acclaimed best-selling author. She is a breakup expert, a brand consultant, CEO of Woohoo Inc. and the Woohoo Radio Network. She will show you how to take your boohoo and turn it into woohoo. Get rebellious and get real. Get your dreams off the back burner. Get inspired and motivated to take action. Start rocking that woohoo that only you do in love, life, and business. She is going to be here for you every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Only here on the Woohoo Radio Network.
When I'm walking past the mirror, don't stress for the night at a time, and my life ain't worried about what you feeling. Got my head on straight, I got the vibe right. I ain't
We're back with Sandra Beck and Linda Franklin. Here's more Powered Up with Beck and Franklin.
Hey, ladies, this is Sandra Beck, and I'm here with Linda Franklin, and we are Powered Up Talk Radio, and we are bringing you the information to the questions nobody wants to talk about. And today we're going to talk about death, the dying process. It's going to be very uplifting, very powerful, because we believe here at Powered Up Talk Radio that information brings power, knowledge brings power. We're going to ask the questions nobody wants to ask. We're going to learn about hospice. And I didn't know anything about hospice before my mom got sick. I didn't know anything about palliative care. Poor Linda. Linda's from Toronto. So we didn't have that, right, Linda? You didn't have that experience. You had a tough experience being in New York and having your mom in Toronto.
Yeah, that was very. We were keeping the airlines in business. Let me tell you, it was a challenge for like 3 years. My dad died 3 years before my mom, so. So we, I had to figure out what to do, and she really did not want to leave her home, and she was perfectly okay. I mean, at that time she was 95, but I knew that she needed around the clock someone there to be with her. So that's what we did, and she made it through for the next 3.5 years like that. So.
Wow. Well, you know what, Linda? I'm so excited that we can bring this information to the airwaves and to our Powered Up listeners. We have Rose Collins from Buffalo Hospice, and she has extensive experience with hospice, over 20 years. It's really amazing. Rose, thank you for joining us on the air today. Do we have Rose?
Show.
There we go.
There we go.
My pleasure. You guys definitely have an interesting show.
We do. We like to ask the questions nobody wants to ask. Rose, I'd like you to introduce yourself to our listeners. Tell us a little bit about what you do and, what is hospice?
Well, sure. I think a lot of people have heard of the word hospice, and they automatically think death. I'm at death's door. And actually, yes, that is true for some people, but not for all. We care for over 700 patients a day here in Erie County, New York, and we care for them in homes, hospitals, nursing homes. And basically, hospice is a way of caring for people with serious illness so that they can live life fully, maintain their dignity, and keep control over their lives. Hospice really dates back to the medieval times. Hospices were considered inns of rest, which lodged and cherished people on their journey. And today's hospice program is like that. I mean, we really do enhance a person's life by providing a whole array of services to enable them to have quality time in the time that remains. In order to enter a hospice program, a physician would certify that a patient has less than 6 months to live. However, we've had people in our program as long as 3 years. At the end of the 6 months, if the physician again certifies that this patient is indeed declining, they can choose to remain in a hospice program.
So that's excuse me. So that is either in a hospice facility, which is like a hospital, or you would come to a person's home every day?
That's correct. Most of our care, over 85% of hospice care in the United States, is provided in the home. That's mandated by Medicare, that we have to provide our hospice services in a patient's home. Now, a patient's home could also be a home-like setting, like an assisted living residence or a nursing home. People frequently learn about hospice care when they're in the hospital because they came in for a treatment perhaps that did not work, and suddenly they find that, the doctor wants to aggressively treat their symptoms. Maybe cure is no longer possible or no longer desired. I think a lot of families, and Sandra, I'm sure, could speak to this, are on an emotional roller coaster.
Oh, sure.
You know, they've tried all different kinds of chemo or radiation treatments or an experimental drug, and the patient just is getting worse. Their symptoms are so distressing, the patient just, wants to leave the hospital. And I think this is where my grandparents were at the time, which was a few years ago, and my grandmother said, take me home, take me home. And we did under hospice care, and she lived another 3.5 weeks having quality of life, able to communicate with us, but have all of those distressing symptoms managed.
So would a hospice caretaker be there 24/7?
No, hospice care is there to supplement the care that is provided by the family. Now, we have cared for live-alone patients before, but we actually have them, agree that if they cannot do their activities of daily living, maybe that's, bathing themselves, dressing themselves, maybe, being able to at least feed themselves, that we do let them know, we're not going to be able to be with you 24 hours a day. We are on call 24 hours a day where we can send a nurse out to check on you. But we aren't staffed, hospices are not staffed like that. Some hospices do what's called continuous care. If there was a crisis at the home, some hospices can provide up to 24 to 48 hours of continuous care. But ordinarily, most hospice programs, there's over 4,000 hospice programs in the United States, they are able to provide medical care, emotional and spiritual support, providing an array of service to keep that patient at home having quality of life without, having to be shipped off to a hospital every time they spike a temperature or their condition, their symptom changes.
Right. But so if a person is elderly or really ill and can't take care of themselves, this is a supplemental because they'd have to have somebody with them at all times. So that they would have to have a caregiver there, and then you would do that over and above.
That's correct.
Got it.
And, and some families just aren't able to provide that primary care person in the home, and some families are able to either hire that person, that personal care aide, if you want to call that. That's what we had to do for my grandparents is we actually had to hire someone that was with them during the night if a family member couldn't be there.
Yes.
But at least we knew someone was with them.
But you have your own
absolutely.
facility. If they couldn't be in the home, then they would actually go to a hospice facility where they would get 24/7.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. We have hospice contracts with a variety of facilities, and so do most hospices in the United States. They have contracts with area nursing homes, assisted living places that can take on a hospice-eligible person and care for them in conjunction with the hospice team going into that setting to provide care.
And you're saying Medicare recognizes this?
Oh, yes. In fact, a lot of people are not aware that it is a Medicare benefit. I mean, we as Americans are entitled to our hospice Medicare benefit. And what we're finding is, believe it or not, and this is something that no one wants to hear about, but if there is increased competition for patients. And so what we're finding and other hospices are finding across the country is that other healthcare settings like long-term care settings, hospitals are hanging on to their patients and not making that referral to hospice until it's extremely late.
Wow.
So we're getting patients that have either days left to live or they're dying before admission, which is really sad. Because
very sad.
The Medicare benefit covers up to 6 months of care. And at the end of the 6 months, if the patient still is indeed declining, they can still access that hospice Medicare benefit. Now, what does that include? That includes 24-hour on-call nurse, 24-hour on-call social worker, 24-hour on-call chaplain. It includes a hospice physician that can be a consultant to the patient's doctor, or in some cases, the patient's doctor says, you know what, I can't make that home visit. Will you make that for me? And there are hospices that are able to do that. And that's important that you have a physician that's trained in palliative medicine. That is a specialty.
Yes, it is.
So, and that means what palliative care is aggressively managing symptoms to enable a person to have quality life even while they're pursuing cure.
Right, and pain. Controlling pain, yeah.
Controlling that pain, controlling distressing symptoms like nausea, constipation, anything that causes that patient distress can be managed with palliative care.
Well, Sandra, I don't know if you knew this, but I certainly didn't know about the Medicare benefit, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners didn't, but so this is really valuable information.
I had no idea. I just know that when I was there, the people would come and, they were so nice. And I was thinking, God, who pays for this? Like, my parents had long-term care insurance, which is a policy that you can buy for when you're older to help offset some of these expenses. But I had no idea that it was part of our Medicare benefits. And I think that alone, because I would have been hesitant to call thinking, oh, this is going to be so much money. I know that sounds terrible because someone's, dying and ill, but the reality of death is, death's expensive. And to know that this was part of our benefits is really, really wonderful. Rose, I want to ask you really quick, before we go to commercial break, we have about 2 minutes. Are hospices nonprofits? Are they part of a visiting nurse association? Are they independently owned? How does the business side work?
All of the above. There are hospices that are for-profit hospices. There are hospices that are not-for-profit. There's hospices that are independent, some that are actually owned by a home health system like a VNA, a Visiting Nursing Association, or are owned by a hospital. The good thing is when you are called a hospice program, you have to be licensed to be a hospice program, and Medicare really looks at that very closely. For example, in New York State, you have to have a certificate of need process in order to open a hospice program. You have to prove that the hospice that's currently in that geographic area is not meeting the need. And so I think that's helpful to know that, not anyone can just open a hospice. Now, I will tell you, though, that is not the case in some other states. There are, for example, numerous hospices in Boston area or in, Florida. Tons of hospices, and how do you know which one you should go with? And that's what I think is worth investigating. And I frankly tell people, Sandra and Linda, I frankly tell them, look for the hospice program that has a whole array of services. They're able to service a patient in a nursing home or a hospital, or they have an inpatient unit, or they have a long-term care setting where they have a contract. That's important.
That's really important. I need to take us to commercial break. Rose, you're such a great guest. I can't wait to have you come back after the break because Linda and I are going to fire a bunch more questions at you. One being how to choose a hospice, what we need to know as caregivers. I think that's worth coming back for after the break. My name is Sandra Beck. I'm here with Linda Franklin. We are Powered Up Talk Radio. For those of you that missed the first half of today's show, I welcome you to go to our website, powereduptalkradio.com. You can go to our host station, TogiNet.com. You can also go to iTunes, type in Powered Up Talk Radio, and you can pick up this show along with many other shows that have to deal with money, sex, beauty, love, health, and now we add death to the list. We're going to make it fun. We're going to keep it light. Come back after the break.
We've got lots more Powered Up with Sandra Beck and Linda Franklin after these messages.
This is for all you girls about 42. Tossing pennies into the fountain of youth.
Tune in to the Travel Chick Show with Bonnie Kitohata, Mondays at 4 p.m. Pacific here on the Rockstar Radio Network. Bonnie will share with you an hour of travel ideas, experiences, adventures, and tips from her guests. Topics range from local day trips to international excursions, from organized professional vacations to spur-of-the-moment getaways. For fun or business, groups or solo, by bus, car, plane, train, boat, bike, hike, or horse. You'll also hear about travel-related subjects like cultures, travel photography, keepsakes, and more. Whether you love to travel yourself or you enjoy seeing the world vicariously through others, join us and enjoy travel stories from around the U.S. and around the world. For more information on the Travel Chick Show, check out Bonnie's website, thetravelchick.com. Then join us for the show, The Travel Chick Show, live Mondays at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, with your host, Bonnie Kitohata, here on the Rockstar Radio Network. Evermore, people have the means to live, but no meaning to live for. These are the words of Dr. Viktor Frankl, the inspiration for the movie Victor and I. That's VIKTOR and I, movie.com. And Talk Sense Radio, The Meaning Connection, with host Mary Simaluka and frequent contributor Alexander Vesley. Friday afternoons at 3, 2 Central on TogiNet.com. More and more people today are discarding their quest for money, possessions, and things, and are instead beginning a serious quest to find meaning in life. Until now, these discussions were historically in the hands of priests, ministers, and scribes, then to philosophers, psychiatrists, and psychologists. Now, these deep discussions are where they should be, in the hands of individuals, on the air with you. Talk Sense Radio, The Meaning Connection, with your host, Mary Simaluka, and frequent contributor, Alexander Vesley. Friday afternoons at 3, 2 Central on TogiNet.com.
We're back with Sandra Beck and Linda Franklin. Here's more Powered Up with Beck and Franklin.
This is for all you girls about 42.
Hi, ladies. This is Sandra Beck, and I'm here with Linda Franklin, and our guest today is Rose Collins, and she is from Buffalo Hospice, and she is answering so many questions about hospice. And you brought up such a great point before we went to the break, Rose, how to choose a hospice. That's actually a personal choice. You get to choose or apply, or does the hospital recommend you? Give us the lowdown on choosing a hospice.
Well, I think in most areas, for example, in New York State, it is, based on the geographic area you live in, that's the hospice program that you would go to. But in other states, when there's many hospices in a geographic area, you want to look for the hospice program that offers a wide array of services for your loved one. Because if you're caring for your loved one at home and suddenly, there's a very distressing symptom that, perhaps the healthcare professionals can't seem to get under control, you want to make sure that hospice program has its own inpatient unit or contracts with an inpatient facility in a hospital where hospice care is offered, because that's really important, that you're going to be able to get that symptom under control without shipping your loved one through an ER. You want to avoid as much less stress as possible. So I think that's real important. Look for a hospice that definitely has an inpatient facility or contracts with an inpatient unit in a hospital. And they also have long-term care contracts with several area nursing homes. That shows that hospice program is a little bit bigger. I guess I'm a little bit biased because I work for a fairly large hospice program, or one of the 20 largest in the country. And so because of that largeness, we're in a lot of different settings. We're able to offer care in about 40 area nursing homes and assisted living centers in the inpatient unit and such. But I would definitely look for some that offer different services. Do they offer massage therapy? Do they offer music therapy? Is incredibly important for patients. I don't know if your mom had that, Sandra, but I can't tell you the beautiful stories that I hear all the time from patients and families who experienced a music therapist coming and playing for their loved one, and all of a sudden that loved one who may have been unresponsive suddenly is more alert or is singing along a tune that they haven't heard in years. And it brings a lot of warmth and joy to the family.
It is. Music, I think, is so powerful. I know my mom was treated at Roswell Cancer Institute, and they would have the piano player, and my mom just loved to listen to that. My father, too. I mean, the thing about hospice, Rose, is hospice affects the whole family. With my mom, I got all this information from hospice sent to me via email, so I understood the dying process. I knew what to expect, so I wasn't so frightened. And, a chaplain came and talked to my mom. They gave my dad all sorts of information. Hospice really, even though the benefits is for the sick person or the dying person, the benefits help the whole family, and that, to me, cannot be denied.
Absolutely. We have a saying that we don't just admit the patient, we admit the family too. You're right on. It really affects every family member.
I have a question now. You just said about admitting a patient. So what has to be in order so that when someone is bringing their loved one to a facility, they're not going to say, well, this is not, you haven't dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's, so you have to have a healthcare proxy if the person can't make the decision for themselves. I mean, all of these things that we have to think of ahead of time, so when we get to those final moments or months, that there's not a problem.
Well, Linda, I think, you're definitely bringing up a good point, but I don't want to make it seem like it's hard to find out about getting your loved one in hospice. All it is a simple phone call. Anyone can refer a patient to hospice. It does not have to be the doctor, although the hospice program does require, us to call the doctor. In other words, the hospice program will call the doctor ourselves. If the family, allows us to, we'll do that for the family and say, Dr. So-and-so, we've received a call from, the Beck family, and they are interested in learning more about hospice. May we go in and do an assessment? And the doctor usually will say, yes, go right ahead. And frankly, you're bringing up another subject, Linda, is sometimes, often, it's very hard for the physician to admit that patient needs hospice care. You know why? Because they've built up a relationship with that patient over months or years, and they simply don't want to go to the family and say, by the way, Mr. or Mrs. Smith, I no longer really can curatively help you. So I need, you really need to go to a hospice program. That's not an easy conversation for anyone to have. And so we actually do a lot of teaching with medical students and residents and fellows to teach them, how do you deliver bad news? How do you talk about this? Because it's not easy. And, hospices are expert at that. And we often actually will go into a hospital. A doctor or a social worker or whatever will say to us, really, we think this patient's very appropriate for hospice. Would you go talk to them? And that's what we do all the day, every day.
I just want to talk for a moment about that healthcare proxy, because I know when my mom was in Toronto, so it was a Canadian hospital, but at the very end. But I mean, they had me faxing back and forth, even though they had a copy or lost it. So is it the same here? Yes, it's real important. And I also do a lot of advanced care planning work. And one of the biggest things I can tell everyone out there is if you are age 18 and over, you need a healthcare proxy. My son, who's 22, has his own healthcare proxy. This is the reason. If he gets in an accident on the way home and can't speak for himself, they are going to look to find out, what do we want done? And, I can't stress this enough, how important it is to have these discussions before a crisis occurs. One of the best websites out there, and I talk about it all the time when I'm giving talks, is gowish.org. That's GOWISH.org. GoWish.org. Fabulous website, teaching people about what's important to them if they could not speak for themselves. And It actually is a little value system. What's the top 10 things you would rank as the most important thing if you couldn't speak for yourself? Is it to know, to be free from pain, to be free from anxiety? Is it not being short of breath? Is it to be kept clean, to have human touch? All these wonderful things, and there's no right or wrong answers, but I think it's so helpful for people to know, hey, I've talked to my loved one about what's important, so they know. They know if something happens. Yes.
We all remember the Karen Ann Quinlans, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And is there a DNR, and how much suffering? So if you can talk about these things ahead of time, even though it's a really difficult talk, you know that at the end they really want to be let go, not kept around and poked and prodded.
Well, and I think, people, everyone's individual, and I think that's one thing that I've really learned is, some people want to pursue aggressive treatment up until the very last breath. And you know what? That's okay. That's their choice. But if they choose not to go that way, there are places like hospice programs that can help them. We aggressively manage symptoms, enabling someone to have quality time, dignified time at home, or in a home-like setting. But for someone, Linda, that really, they want everything done. Give me it all. I don't fault them one bit. They're choosing a different course than maybe I would choose, but it's their choice.
Right. Well, I think age has something to do with it. But I mean, we just lost a friend recently who had cystic fibrosis, and he managed to hang on for 42 years. Now that was, that's quite unusual with cystic. He was in and out of the hospitals all the time, and he always managed to. He had 2 double lung transplants. He had a kidney transplant. He had throat cancer, and I mean, but at the end, his body just couldn't take any more.
Right.
And I know that I mean, he was, at the very end, it's really hard because they're still breathing with help, but they're really, it seems like they really aren't there anymore. So, and I know that the parents wanted to just, cut off the machine, but the wife was holding back because she didn't want, as long as he was there in the bed, he was still alive. It's heart-wrenching, it really is.
It is, and one of the things, I had this discussion with my spouse because I wanted to know, hey, here I am going out teaching about advanced care planning, and hey, you don't have one. We don't have. I think it's important that if I'm going out and teaching about this, I better have one, and you better have one. So we had to have these long discussions, and what you're talking about is what brings meaning to life. Okay, so one of my clear things that I told him is, if I cannot feel your kiss on my cheek, and I don't know who you are, and I don't know who my kids are, allow natural death. Let me go. Because I don't know who you are, and I don't know my kids, and I can't feel you. I can't, hold your hand or whatever. Allow natural death, meaning don't kill me, but allow death to naturally occur.
Yes.
Because hospice does not hasten death, nor do we postpone death. We all know death is going to come, but I know a really wonderful hospice advocate, a board-certified physician who is in New York State, and she's fabulous, and she actually has that written right in her healthcare proxy, Linda, is, if I have less than a 5% chance of surviving and having the quality of life I had before I walked in this door, allow natural death.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really important because you want to follow the wishes of the patient. And it's really hard because even though they may want natural death, the thought of losing them is so horrendous. But you really have to go with their wishes because that's what they had stated when they were in solid mind and body.
Correct.
Well, and I'm
Correct.
going to buzz right now, ladies, and I'm going to say it's the most loving thing you can do for your family members and your friends is to make your wishes clear. My mom knew she wanted to be cremated. My mom knew she wanted to be interred, in an urn in Canandaigua. She knew what she wanted. My father's been very clear about, what he wants. Do they want a funeral? No funeral? Do they want end-of-life care? All those things. That means there's so much less arguing. There's so many fewer decisions to be made on the behalf of your children or your best friend or your spouse. I'm going to take us to commercial break now. My name is Sandra Beck. I'm the host of Powered Up Talk Radio along with Linda Franklin. Our guest today is Rose Collins. She's from Buffalo Hospice. I would encourage all of you today to find out what is available in your area with your loved ones. Know that Medicare covers this. You have these benefits. We're going to bring Rose back. We're going to keep her on the line here today, and we're going to talk more about things that families can do to help themselves with the assistance of a hospice program and hospice care providers when we come back from the break. So Rose and Linda, hang in with us. We're going to continue talking about hospice and our options.
We've got lots more Powered Up with Sandra Beck and Linda Franklin after these messages.
We often ask, is that all there is? Why is this happening to me? Why am I always broke? How am I going to survive this mess? Then join Dr. Geraldine Tegeloff for Nature Spirit Speak, 7 p.m. Tuesday evenings on TogiNet.com. Geraldine is a metaphysician, nature intuitive, and prosperity coach who shares with you how she went from totally broke to living what she would call her perfectly prosperous life. Through the combination of a wealth of metaphysical knowledge and her amazing ability as an intuitive, Geraldine brings to you the secrets of her magical journey of healing emotionally, spiritually, and financially. As with the ancient seers and master teachers, Geraldine has a unique gift of being able to connect to the simple yet profound messages brought to us by Mother Nature, and happily shares these through today's note to self on her webpage, naturespiritspeak.com. If you need help with your journey, why not connect with Geraldine during her show, Nature Spirit Speak, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Central on TogiNet.com. Everyday Autism Miracles with Shannon Penrod, Friday afternoons at 2, 1 Central on TogiNet.com. Life after an autism spectrum diagnosis doesn't have to be difficult. It can be joyful, happy, and filled with hope. Join Shannon Penrod, author, speaker, coach, and mom of a 6-year-old recovering from autism for this inspirational hour of hope. She's even authored a series of children's autism books with her son, Jim. For more information about the books, Shannon, and Everyday Autism Miracles, go to her website, shannonpenrod.com. From there, you can also get to her other websites, blogs, and connections. On Everyday Autism Miracles, you'll hear stories from parents whose children have made miraculous strides. You'll also get the inside dish on therapies, treatments, supplements, and how to get funding to help you afford them. Miracles abound in the autism community, so tune in for Everyday Autism Miracles to listen, share, laugh, and surround yourself with hope. Everyday Autism Miracles with Shannon Penrod. Friday afternoons at 2, 1 Central on TogiNet.com.
We're back with Sandra Beck and Linda Franklin. Here's more Powered Up with Beck and Franklin.
Hey, ladies, this is Sandra Beck, and I'm Linda Franklin, and we've got a flurry of questions coming in, not only from our Togi chat. My phone lit up, my Facebook lit up, so is my email rose. You're opening up so many questions, really great questions. I'm going to go right to you because we have a question coming in that is relating to the age of people in hospice. I thought hospice was just for old people who are dying, and one of our listeners wrote to me about her son who died from DIPG at age 3, and a teacher who was still teaching when she had a little boy with leukemia, and his hospice team came into your class to talk about this little boy's changes. Now, how does hospice differ when you have a 3-year-old versus an 80-year-old?
Mm-hmm. Well, children are just sweet angels, and especially those that are dealing with a disease that is not getting better. So we have a whole team of people. We call it our Essential Care Program, and it was one of the first that was set up in the country. But basically, it's a whole interdisciplinary team, just like hospice has an interdisciplinary team with a physician, a nurse, a social worker, a chaplain, a trained volunteer, a bereavement counselor. Well, in addition to all those people, for the children's program, we also have called a wonderful professional called a child life therapist, and they go in and they do play therapy with kids and their siblings so that the brother or sister of that sick child understands it's not their fault that their brother or sister has to go into the hospital or has to have this, painful treatment done. We do a lot of play therapy with them. We actually are teaching some other hospice programs on how to set up a child program because it is different. It does cost more to care for a child than it does an adult. So, and there are a lot of needs that the parents have as well. It's heart-wrenching, frankly, to pull your child out of school and have them in the hospital for 3 months, and not to mention the medical bills. So there's a lot of needs that have to be met when a child is very sick and eventually may need a hospice program.
When someone comes into hospice, whether it be a child or an adult, does the patient and family stick with the same team that's assigned to their loved one, or does it keep changing? Like in hospitals, like the nurse is there 1 minute and then she's not there, so someone else comes in and fills in. It gets kind of confusing because if you like somebody and then they're not there, and
right. And Linda, I think, healthcare nowadays is so complicated. I will tell you we try and keep a consistent presence of the same team members going in and out. I mean, obviously there's vacations, there's people who get sick, and then you've got to have people that fill in. But I can tell you one thing. My daughter had open heart surgery in a hospital, and I, in 3 days, counted 17 different nurses in 3 days. And I was like, this is crazy. And I'll tell you one thing. I will always make sure that if I have a loved one in a hospital, I have another family member, whether that's me or someone else, with them 24 hours a day, because there's just too much stuff that goes on that really concerns me. Being in healthcare over 20 years, I do get concerned and I hear about stuff. So, I think if we can do that for our loved ones, that's important. Make sure you have an advocate, someone that knows that patient's medical condition, what drugs they need to take or that they have taken, so that they're informed. But back to the children,
Wait, let me jump in really quick because I want to add one more thing before we go back to the children. I can tell you from being a patient in a hospital and having a birth And my ex-husband, who was my husband at the time, left me there. There was nobody there. I couldn't reach the bell. I couldn't talk. I couldn't get to anyone. I couldn't, I had just had a premature baby. It was awful. It was awful to be left alone. So I'm going to buzz right in there and say, yes, absolutely, your patient needs somebody there, 24/7 if it can be, just because you can't help yourself.
Right. And Linda, did I answer your question though about the children?
I don't know. I think that we were I interjected and we were talking about keeping the same team intact for the patient.
Right.
So now we can talk about I think for children too, it's probably even more important that they trust and they like the people that are trying to help them.
Yeah, one of our nurses who cares for children, she cared for children at a hospice program in L.A. and now she's back here in Buffalo. And she said, when you care for a child that is dealing with end of life, she goes, it totally changes your whole life. She said, when I'm at the grocery store and I'm waiting in line, she goes, I don't care if someone cuts in front of me. I just don't. It's like things that bother us, those little things, they fall away.
Yeah.
They just fall away. And I think if I can't stress something more important, to people, it's treasure the time you have. Treasure the time you have with your loved one. Talk to them. Make sure you tell them you love them, as often as you can, because you just don't know.
That's so true. The thing is, we when we have someone that's ill and lose somebody, we're very conscious of that, and then life takes over again, and we go back to living day by day and not treasuring the moment.
Right. I just saw something that a palliative care nurse wrote. One of the top 5 things that people who are dying wish they hadn't done, and that was work too much.
Yeah.
They wish they hadn't worked so much. And so I think balance is so important, especially us women. We have to have balance in our life. We're running those kids around. We've got them involved in umpteen number of activities. And are we stressing ourselves out? Yes. Are we stressing the kid out? Most probably, too. And I'm not trying to make people feel guilty out there, but I can't tell you the number of women that I see that are just running their kids everywhere without maybe thinking, hey, you know what? What's the most important thing right here that my child enjoys doing? Well, let's do that for this next 6 months instead of doing 3 to 5 activities over the next 6 months. But that's my little 2 cents. Sorry, I had to just take it.
I love
take it
that.
there.
I'm a big proponent of that because I watched the people in my neighborhood run themselves silly. And, since my divorce, Rose, and I'm a single mom of 2 kids, I can't afford to run them everywhere. And the funny thing that happened, I get rid of my big fancy cars. I, downsize my lifestyle. I'm driving a little old minivan right now. But we have to focus on doing the things we love, and we end up going hiking. We end up going, to the local fair because it's free. We go to the concerts in the park and dance. That was not part of my life prior to my divorce. Living in Beverly Hills, everything was, how much can we get? We have a nanny. We've got this to go. We got to go, Mommy and me. We've got to do all this stuff and go, do. I have had more fun, walking with my kids, throwing rocks in a creek. And I know that sounds totally hokey, and maybe it's because I'm from Buffalo and we, don't have all the fancy things that Beverly Hills has, but we have more fun connecting, and that's exactly what you're talking about, is that we don't connect when we take our kid to karate, then to soccer, then to, piano lessons, and then you just don't have that connection. And it's the same as women. Linda and I went through this last year when I was going so crazy. I couldn't connect with Linda on a regular basis. Now, I'm like, here is this wonderful woman, and, Robin, who's on here, too, on the chat, and I don't have time to connect with the people I love. Well, that's a problem. And I think you're right on with this, whether you're a parent or a friend.
Right. And working with people, all the time who have serious illness, that, to me, it's just like everything, all the little things fall away. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you've told that person that you love them and you're spending time with them. Presence is everything. It is everything.
I have a question, Rose. When it's getting to be toward the end, and we said death is a process, and there definitely is that last dying process, would you say the majority of people that you've seen and worked with ready? They said, I'm ready. They're not, at the end, they're not afraid, or they are afraid.
I think, and this comes right from Dr. Don Schumacher, who's head of the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization. He basically says we die the way we live. If we lived an angry life, we die angry. Mm-hmm. If we live a life that is loving and caring and nurturing, we will most likely have a very loving, peaceful death. And I think that's what Sandra experienced with her mom, because I talked to her offline about it, and she just, with her and her sister Susan, just were overwhelmed with how peaceful it was for their mom when she passed.
Yeah. Well, that is also a very, very good lesson for people, and I believe in that wholeheartedly. If you have an angry life, you're going to have an angry death. So sit and look at, what you're doing every day and how you feel, and start to connect with yourself to change that.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm so glad, though, that we had these conversations, because a lot of people just don't want to talk about it. So I'm really glad you guys called and that we could have this, that hopefully it was helpful for some people out there.
Well, and it gets easier. I will tell you, for somebody like me who's, blabbing all over the radio, but in my personal life kind of very private, the first time my mom talked to me about actually dying, and that she wasn't afraid and she was ready to go and, it was okay. And then I had talked to a grief counselor who told me, you need to give your mom permission to go, to say, it's okay, Mom, you can go now. I'm okay. I can take care of myself. We'll take care of Dad. He's fine, and all those conversations we had, I would have never in a million years known what to say. But because I started asking, because I started researching, and I had those conversations, now I can talk to my dad about his, desires when it's his time, as we put it, and not get all creeped out, not get all weirded out or freaked out. It's just a natural part of life, so it's a natural conversation. And the more you talk about it, the easier it gets. I'll admit, the first time when my mom talked to me about her dying, I don't know, I was all weirded out. It was just not something I was prepared for. But because we discussed it as a family and it became conversation, and I think it helped when we put my mom's chemo wig on my newborn baby. But, it became just part of what families do. This is what happens when somebody dies, and this is how we get through it together. And you can't do that if you don't communicate.
Well, that's the way society has programmed us. We celebrate life, but we don't celebrate death.
Right, and and people don't realize that actually it's been proven that if you have hospice care, you have a heart condition and you're in hospice, you have a lung condition and you're in hospice, you actually live longer under hospice care than you do if you did not get it. Now that's unusual to hear that, but that is true, and it was research that was done by the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization in the Journal of Pain and Symptom Management. So hospice patients are actually living longer than those who don't receive hospice.
Rose, I hate to cut you off. I could talk to you all day, just like Linda and Robin on my other show. We always have such great conversations. We're going to bring you back later in the year and talk some more about what people can do to prepare for this life event that's going to hit us all at one time or another. My name is Sandra Beck. I'm here with Linda Franklin. This is Powered Up Talk Radio. Our guest has been Rose Collins of Buffalo Hospice. You guys get out there, have the tough conversations with all that information. We are going to be powerful women. We'll see you next week.
We're so glad you joined us for Powered Up with Beck and Franklin. Sandra Beck, Los Angeles-based single mother and technology company owner, knows what it's like to be fit, funny, and fantastic in your 40s. Linda Franklin, a New Yorker with a successful marriage and